All right, let's go ahead and do a highlight video here on game 385, 386 between Michigan and Minnesota. 3, the number painted across the market. Total on this game in the 54 and a half, 55 range. Probably going to be cold, and weather could be a little bit of a factor up in Minneapolis for this one. But I'm joined, of course, by pro bettor and handicapper Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. And Brad, this is, probably the spotlight game here, I would say, of week 8. What do you think about Michigan and Minnesota?
So power rating says it's right on the mark. I got Michigan by 3. The kind of the fan in me, the historical college football fan in me says Minnesota's the play here. Why? Michigan on the road against ranked teams, and this trend that I tweeted got some play early this week. Michigan's 1-20 straight up. The last 21 times they went on the road and played a ranked team, it's been historically bad for them in these big-time performances. Also, I mean, in my opinion, Minnesota's got the better quarterback easily. Tanner Morgan over Joe Milton, who was a surprise starter. I mean, a lot of us were thinking McCaffrey was going to be the heir apparent to Shea Patterson, and he wasn't. Joe Milton is the starter, a little bit more mobile for them. Michigan lost 10 guys in the NFL draft and then lost a couple more guys to opt out. I downgraded Michigan significantly in my power ratings. What's worried me I've not gotten to the window yet, I'm betting Minnesota, is, man, PJ Fleck, I think it was on Tuesday in his press conference, kind of hinted at a few, COVID issues possibly for Minnesota. And that's why I think we've seen some money trickle in on Michigan. That's the only thing stopping me from betting the Gophers here. One other thing that people aren't going to talk about, total is starting to get some money on the under. I agree with it. I think you're going to be stunned. Maybe because I live in Vegas and the weather's always great, but I think nationally, because we've only seen basically Southern schools play so far this year, I think that kickoff temperature is going to be in the upper 20s. So, I mean, that's going to be almost a shock to the system for people that have been watching college football so far this year. I agree with the under money.
Yeah, I agree with it too. And, I don't really know what sort of quantifiable impact we can suggest regarding home field advantage and crowd noise and stuff like that. But, if it's cold and blustery and kind of miserable and you have to create all of your own energy, I know it's the first game of the year and these guys are going to be very excited, but, it's going to be just quiet and you're just going to hear the wind whistling around and all that type of thing. And, I think that's just such a strange atmosphere for these players, especially when you play major conference football like this in the Big Ten. You're used to playing. Obviously, it's not the big house. It's in Minnesota, but you're used to playing in front of loud crowds, and you've got this upset potential game and all these kinds of things. I think it creates a really weird, almost docile environment for this game that could end up lending itself towards, something like the under. And furthermore, too, look, for Minnesota, okay, Rashad Bateman's back, and that's awesome. That's very good for Tanner Morgan, but they lost Tyler Johnson, who was the top wide receiver for that team last year. They also lost Rodney Smith, the top running back for that team last year. I would be surprised if at the outset Minnesota is as efficient offensively as they were last year, because now Bateman gets all the attention, gets all the double coverage, all the help underneath, help over the top, stuff like that. Michigan will game plan to take away Rashad Bateman. And if they're able to do that, then it's on the Minnesota running game. And as flawed as this Michigan program has been, they're still generally pretty good against the run unless they play Ohio State. Minnesota doesn't have the athletes or the offensive line Ohio State does. I agree with you. I think the under is the play here. My line's Michigan -5. I'm not going to play the game because I do want to see how Michigan does with some new personnel and with those opt-outs. But I think you're onto something there with the under for sure.
Yeah, I could see it being like a 20-17 old school 3 yards in a cloud of dust type of game. One thing I will say, I do like Minnesota's offensive line. So Falele at guard is one of the best guards. He's like that 400-pounder, legit dude there. And Ibrahim at running back's really good for them, even though they lost, like you mentioned, Rodney Smith. The one thing that concerns me about Minnesota's offense that people aren't going to realize, they lost their offense coordinator, Shiroka, to Penn State. That was PJ Fleck's right-hand man going back to the Western Michigan days. So we'll see how that adjustment goes. They hired Mike Sanford Jr., who I'm familiar with, was a disaster as the head coach at Western Kentucky. They only gave him a couple years. And he didn't wow me as the Notre Dame offensive coordinator either. So I think they downgraded an offensive coordinator. So that lends itself to the under here. You talked me into it. I started, I lean under. It's going to be cold and stuff. And now the way you talked and I came over the top, yeah, I'm going to bet the under now.
Well, there we go. Consensus opinion on the under here in this spotlight game between Michigan and Minnesota. Again, make sure you listen to our full editions of ATS Radio, which you can find on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you stream and download your podcast content.